Our next presentation will be facilitated by Dr. Michelle Gannon. Michelle is a sociologist, a human-centered design consultant, a researcher, and a resident of Walla Walla, Washington. Her incredible body of research centers around, but is not limited to, deep, intimate relationships such as families, community practices, and other intimate relationships. After an overview of her latest and grading findings, Dr. Janning is going to take us through our own meaning-making process workshop. And then we're going to deeper dive into the question, how does age and social group impact how we attach meaning? Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. You remember how Jasmine yesterday said she was a cheerleader? So I was a mascot. So I'm the goofy one that jumps around and sometimes makes sense. I'm really glad to be here. I'm also a person in my career who sought after in various professional engagements with groups. Are you my people? Are you my people? Are you my people? I think you're my people. I'm really excited about the connections I've been making yesterday and today, and hopefully after this as well. I'll start with a story about my mom. Alden talked about, you talked about your dad. I'm going to talk about my mom, Yvonne Janning. She's 82, alive and well, and with it mentally, living in rural Minnesota. She actually was the first director of that small town's, my hometown's, early childhood family education program, and became the person who instigated and then fulfilled the design, building, creation of an intergenerational center, where parents with young children, preschool age, would interact happenstance-wise as well as intentionally with aging adults in the community for various activities. So I'm really inspired by my mom, and if you ask Vonda, she and I spent most of the time talking about our moms and the fact that they're both in need of a lot of care, and we as caretakers are going through a lot right now and thinking about the stages of their lives. So that's my intergenerational story. I'll talk about my son in a second. I wanted to also call attention to some of the really cool connections I'm seeing. I'm greatly, or have seen Jasmine talked about the importance of us knowing our story. My goal for this section is to have you learn a little bit of self-awareness so that you can communicate it out with other people that you care about and that are in your world. I'm grateful to Fred for talking about borders because I'm going to spend a lot of time on boundaries and boundary work. I'm also grateful to the Hive because my son just started at Pomona College and he met his friendship group at the Hive at a cyanotype workshop on a Friday night. So my kid has friends because of the Hive, I have to say. And then I'm also grateful to June because I do a lot of community engaged research. I direct that program at Whitman College along with teaching sociology. But why I'm really here, in addition to sharing my past research from the last 150 years, is that I am part of a team of faculty at Whitman College in Walla Walla, and we just created a human-centered design academic concentration. It's starting next year. So this fall, we worked for 2 years to develop it, get the right stakeholders. We used human-centered design techniques to create a human-centered design curriculum. I believe we did that, and we got passed by the faculty, and we secured permanent funding from the administration, and are currently also fundraising as one does for all the bells and whistles that we hope will come in our future. So I have a lot of hats that I wear. What I'm going to talk about my research, so it's going to be my voice for the first chunk, and then I want you to play with some of the findings that I have that I've used to develop a tool that you can kind of self-assess. So my design work as a sociologist is I'm really good at making surveys and designing interview questions, and I also do a lot of consulting with nonprofits to figure out how might they strategically plan their next steps. So the overview of today, if I do this right, I'm hitting the arrow and nothing is happening. Can somebody help me with the slides?
Our best helpers are probably right over there in that corner room. I'm not sure I'm any better. Do you mind opening up and seeing if they want to step over?
Well, the next slide is the overview that I just gave. Well, thank you. Which is that I'm going to share the first two sections are a little bit of some nuggets of my past research about digital and physical objects and spaces. I'm the person who studies the stuff in spaces, mostly of family life, and looks at how that tells the story of people's roles and relationships and inequalities. And then I'll talk in particular about work and family as borders and realms of our lives and how we might think about that sociologically. We'll have a workshop where you get to think about your own experiences with these boundaries, and then a discussion. And this is the kind of thing where the last couple slides are discussion questions. It'd be great if we get to a couple of them. If we don't, they're obviously going to be fine for you to have food for thought as you depart the workshop. What do I need to do to flip the slide, Danielle?
It is.
It is? Oh. Okay. It's not the same on here, though. So
But as you hit it, it will.
okay. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not a Mac user. Okay, so some terms. I'm a sociologist. How many of you have ever taken a sociology class? All right, we've got some people in here who dabbled with using and stretching your sociological imagination. This is a term from C. Wright Mills, who wrote the book, The Sociological Imagination, in the middle of the 20th century. And this is a skill, a way of thinking, that if you encounter any phenomenon, any experience, any puzzle, when you approach that puzzle or that phenomenon or that way of doing something, you're always going to consider a person's individual biography, what's the story, in the context of socio-historical goings on. You never do just one or the other. You always consider it's somebody's story, and you also think about the larger context. So if somebody loses a job, you don't go immediately and only to the place, what did you do wrong to lose your job? That might have been true. But you also think about if it's an economic recession, think about the sector in which unemployment happens. If you fall in love with someone, you might feel like you're the only person in the world to whom that has ever happened, and you feel like a very individualized experience. Of course, that's true. But we would also consider the context in which that falling in love, that demonstration, and maybe even that experience of an emotion is also socially correct. So to possess the sociological imagination means you think about the story and the data, you think about the context and the individual biography. There's a subfield in sociology that I am a big fan of, and a lot of the work that the worksheet that you have in front of you as part of is something called cognitive sociology. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but there's a great theorist named Ebiatar Zerubbabel, and then one of his students, Christina Nippert-Eng, who talked about the ways we even think, how we imagine our day-to-day life, how we even consider what's going on in our brain, our cognition, is also socially situated. Sort of like the sociology of neuroscience, right? We have brains, we are obviously biological specimens, but there are ways in which our social world shape how we think about ourselves and our experiences. We're at a conference on intergenerational relations. I'm a family scholar. We have a framework called the Life Course Perspective, which basically says the stages and ages of our lives help us understand people's experiences. Not necessarily linear, right? I think there are a lot of people who are young at heart. There are a lot of people who jump to different stages at different times. Certainly we can think about that with marriages and partnerships and childbearing. But nonetheless, where you are and when you are in your life matters for how you might be experiencing really anything that we're talking about today. And Fred, when you asked the question about the savings book, yep, I had one too. Life realms. I'm using that term, and you'll play with this in the worksheet, basically to refer to what sociologists would call social institutions. So if you have your paid work life, and maybe you have a faith community, maybe you have a medical provider or others in the kind of body care work, maybe you are part of an economy or certainly vote in elections. Political realms, work realms, religious realms, families. These are all life realms that we're talking about. So as you're thinking about your own experiences, where are the places and the realms that might matter to you? I'm a sociologist, so by definition, social groups are part of my bread and butter, and we define it as at least two people. So that's my definition of social group, at least two people, which we call a dyad. But we also study groups that are as large as a nation state, large as many millions of people. And then social boundaries, which is again, referencing sort of the borders idea. We can think about boundaries that we create, we socially construct between ourselves and others. Geography plays a role, social categories play a role. But there are also ways to think about social boundaries in terms of how we allocate time, how we allocate space, where we put things, what things we constitute as either this life realm or that life realm. And even the people that we have in our worlds and in our networks, do we identify, maybe label, maybe think about them cognitively as you belong over here with this part of my life, and you all belong over here. Not as an inequality, just as a sort of a belonging into different life realms. So the word boundaries here I'm using to mean any number of things, how we construct and go over boundaries between actual spaces, between identifying the meanings of things between groups, even between time. Okay, so a little bit about my research, some nuggets. I have done 25 years worth of research on different life stages and how spaces and objects tell a story about what's going on in families. So I'm going to share 3 really quick ones today. This is not meant to be a big overview, but an invitation. If any of these intrigue you, please talk to me at lunch or after today, because I love hearing stories from people about how these topics may matter similarly or differently. Survey and interview research is the data that this is based on. The first is a study I did about 10 years ago on college students' conceptions of home and childhood identities. So the word intergenerational, a lot of the examples we've been thinking about have been aging individuals, but of course children are also a part of that. This semester I'm teaching a childhood and design class where students are working with the Walla Walla Valley Disability Network and thinking about their own experiences as 18 to 22-year-olds in their transition, presumably, legally, and maybe socially out of childhood, and yet still retaining some of those features. This is a survey study where we ask students, how do you think of home? The home you left, the home in your residence hall as a first-year student, the home that you are in an off-campus rental house with fellow college students in your future imagined home. And one of the coolest findings, so if you think about the objects that someone might bring in a transition to a new space as an adult, whether that's a college or even moving to a different room in an apartment as you become somebody who's now not the kid in the house, but you're also one of the breadwinners. Lots of ways you can imagine shifting space, thinking about the objects you do or you do not bring with you, maybe strategically. And in our survey, we found not only did people strategically think about what objects from home to not bring, I'm not going to bring a stuffed animal, I'm not a kid anymore. If they did bring it, by the way, women were more likely to bring stuffed animals, but if they did bring it, maybe they hid it in a drawer or under a pillow until they met people they really thought were their people. They maybe dated somebody or had an intimate partner, or certainly close friendships, and like, here's my teddy bear. This is who I used to be. Actually, it's still who I am, but I don't want to tell. So there are ways in which the objects and spaces and strategically how we move things in our lives might tell a story about transitions across these social boundaries of life stage, from childhood to adulthood. It's not just turning 18. The objects that we have and the spaces that we occupy also. Love letters is one of people's favorite topics to talk about. So I don't study what's in love letters. I study how people use them, store them, keep them, burn them, find them, lose them. The curatorial practices of love letters. That's my research survey data. Several hundred people ages 18 to 80, and here's what I'll say about love letters: a gender and an age difference. Women save more stuff than men and save more romantic communications. And by the way, digital and physical are included in this definition. And Post-its, FYI, definitely count. And yes, you can break up with someone on a Post-it. Wasn't that a Sex and the City episode? Yes. So those are all in there, and you're imagining what constitutes a love letter. It's pretty cool. Text message. Older individuals less likely to preserve and participate in love letters in terms of digital. And we know that in part because of the comfortability with technology, the access to the tools that one might use. So for example, if you're 25 and one of my former students and now friend talked about how she had a folder she created on her smartphone that she labeled texts from cute boys. Pretty sure my mom has a lot of texts from cute boys since my father passed away many, many years ago, but she does not know how to make a folder. And so there's some generational differences and age differences with comfortability. But here's what I will say about love letters and the saving of them. It is also the case that young people are sort of worried about missing the handwritten love letter thing. And that young people are maybe, I can't remember if it's totally curvilinear, but certainly older individuals might connote more meaning to handwritten love letters, and so do young people, because of the fear of losing something that feels like close contact. So yes, younger people are more comfortable with digital communication, making those folders of text from people on their phone, but they also imagine that they might be losing something they never got to have. A sort of nostalgia, imagined nostalgia. I had a lot of fun playing with the concept of imagined nostalgia in my other work. And so love letter curatorial practices, I think we can imagine, we can see some expected outcomes in terms of ages, but also some surprising things. And then finally, family photo taking and sharing. So this was an interview study of partnered individuals and who took the photos. And this was done in 2014. So this is a little bit, not quite, you have 25,000 pictures on your smartphone era, but getting there, so a lot to manage. And it is the case in the interview study that we did that not only were women more likely to take the photos, like I don't know how many pictures I'm actually in when my kid was little, but it's about 1% of the number of pictures my husband is in with their son. But he's making up for it. Anyway, so the family photo taking is women, the family sharing is also women, and younger and older women. And why they talked about in the interviews they felt like they were the ones responsible for sharing is because they felt responsible for kinship. So the making of scrapbooks and the creation of shutterfly albums or other kinds of things. Women still disproportionately relative to the men leader. You talk about them not only doing that work, but feeling like they're supposed to. The kind of emotional labor of managing the story of the family. That sentiment, by the way, also true in saving loved ones. Women are more likely to save them, possibly to preserve that line. In terms of displaying, also likely for women, but here's what I'll say. The younger men, the younger fathers in particular, I forgot to mention these were all parents. Younger fathers were very, very keen on sharing and displaying photos, especially with their children. And so and especially if they were digital. So the notion of sitting down at a computer and let's look at the family vacation we took 2 years ago with your 8-year-old kid. Dads did that a lot, especially if they were young. So these are some beginning research findings. If you want to talk more about these topics after today or later today, I'm happy to do that. The last research topic, and this segues into the exercise, earliest research I did, and this was my PhD work, way back in the year 2000. And this is work-home boundaries. And I really want to honor Christina Nippert-Ang, who's a sociologist who was teaching for a long time at Illinois Institute of Technology. She also worked a lot with interior designers and architects like her about how to think about people research in the design process. And she helped me understand, and as her book Home and Work did, that the way we use objects and space and time and activities and people, and I don't mean use people, are actually tools and locations for these boundaries between life and life. So if you think about your paid work life and your non-paid or non-work life, and by the way, for students and recent students in the room, life and work are just a big old mess that's all combined. And so I do this exercise with students, and it becomes a little bit harder to imagine. But you can think about life realms as homework versus paid work versus hang out with friends. So these are the locations where public-private boundaries or work and home boundaries might be possible. And here's the other part, the theoretical part, boundary work. So if you're the type of person who is, I have everything really compartmentalized. I have like a work calendar, a home calendar, separate keychains. I have different outfits I wear. The commute, by the way, cognitive sociologists would say that is a shifting out of one realm into the other, from one self to the other. If you're that person, I keep a lot of things separate in these realms, you would be what Christina Nippert-Ang and I would call a segmentist. And your boundary work, the energy that you would have to spend is when people throw integrated stuff at you. They're like, hey, and you get a call from home during the workday and you're like, shoot. I'm totally interrupting my workflow. I can't put myself in mom mode while I'm in professor mode. I mean, maybe some of you in this room have an understanding. Rhonda and I the whole time talking about our moms, and we're like, who are we today? I don't know. And so if you're a segmentist, the boundary work, the energy you have to spend is on like crossing a boundary. Right? If you're an integrationist, which is not necessarily the best word in the world to use, but the one that makes sense here, you're sort of like everything is the same, and you think of yourself cognitive sociology, the same. It's the same person when you're at work and when you're home. You know, change your clothes. Everything is a big, mashup on your either digital or physical calendars. You don't mind getting interrupted. Maybe you talk a lot about your personal life at work, or maybe you talk a lot about work at home. Or maybe if you're like me and you married to somebody you work with, you have to have strategy to put a boundary in. That's that boundary work. integrationist work, the energy is creating work so that you can manage, I don't know, handling it. And it's hard for those people that are kind of, everything is one big realm, to put a boundary in means, I guess I can't talk about my kid at work. That's hard. So you're all thinking about yourselves now. Good. So the exercise for us to do is to play with the next slide, which I think looks like that. And there's a handout. It's the pink and yellow handout with a lot of dots in the middle. And for each person, I don't think this will take too long, but I want to allow enough time. Just a fun little Likert scale. And I want you to mark for each horizontal line. And by the way, these are objects, spaces, activities, time, people. Mark where you fit on each of the horizontal dotted lines first. For those people doing the Zoom, the slide is something you could just do and imagine where you might mark that. It should be pretty manageable.
And we also put it in the chat too.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Does anybody else need one?
Oh. Oh. No, cool. Okay, that'd be nice, thank you.
So as you get towards the bottom of the list, take the piece of paper, I think this will work, and fold it in half. Or draw a line down the middle. And then how I want you to do this is to look at, hold the paper up and see which way it tips. So the heaviness, or the dots more on the right or the dots more on the left, as we open it back up again. And in doing that self-assessment, where you get to see yourself. And by the way, I have an instrument that's way more than 5 lines. As you can imagine, scale variables, data person. You need just to sort of think about, if you tip right, if you tip towards I do not see or separate much, you are an integrationist. If you tip left, you are a segmentist. If you are an integrationist, like having everything go together, the emotional work you have to do, the boundary work you have to do, is going to be when somebody foists the border on you, foists separation, foists you have to have your life around be separate. So you having some revelations back there, Ella? And if you are if you are a segmentist that tips to your left, your challenge, your boundary work is when someone comes at you with something in your work world that's in your personal time or space. So that's where you're going to be. You feel like you're getting to know yourselves a little bit? So, okay.
But what if we want to be the other? Really
If you want to be somewhere, well, first of all, it's a limited scale, so these might not be the best proxies for your actual life. But measurement issues aside, I would want to ask, why do you want to be? Where is that pressure coming from? Is it from the greedy workplace? Because we also know that integration doesn't just happen bidirectionally. Some people might have a lot of their work stuff come home, but not the other way around. And by the way, there are demographic differences. In my interview data, women were much more reluctant, and especially these were lawyers, academics. They were much less likely to want to disclose or bring a lot of family life into the workplace because they feared a little bit of stigma of not taking the job seriously enough. Whereas fathers could bring a little bit, and that humanized them. So there's strategies. So I would think about, where is that coming from? What structural places, actually, and maybe cultural values, would make us feel like we're doing it wrong? That's what I would think about. Well, then you can do all of the things. I think what I'll do, oh, yeah, Fred, question.
This is awesome. I'm not sure
Yeah, right. Probably measurement problem.
3 years ago, I would have set up an integration.
Yeah.
And then I had to work at home. And I ran back to my office the very first time I had that.
Right.
So my question is like, over the pandemic, have changed our work, or what are the implications on workforces?
You know what? I wonder if that's a good question to ask on this slide. Absolutely, it has mattered. And I look, I'm an extrovert, and I went home and worked, and it was really hard for me. I was putting on shows on my online classes. But I also will say that I sort of have turned a little bit into a hermit more than I thought I would. Yeah. Some of that is just exhaustion. But I think COVID mattered a lot. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to leave these here. And see what time it is, and let you all talk with each other for a few minutes. I think we have 15 minutes, is that right, Danielle?
Yeah, we have like 12 more, like this is 12, please.
Yeah.
Which, like, we need to talk as small teams.
So I was gonna say, let's talk in small groups for 5 minutes, and then we'll share out, and take any number of these questions you would like. I think it's a good question, I still wonder about this. I still have a little bit of an imposter syndrome of like, I'm not a designer, I'm a sociologist. So I'm wondering if people can help me understand if this is a good design question, probably. I also think, and this is related, of course, to the theme of the whole 2 days, is what about this might matter intergenerationally? Fred's question, of course, really important. How have we changed? How has society, how have maybe the external pressures managed to change how we think about ourselves? And by the way, being one or the other isn't right or wrong. These are not value judgments. And then I also want you to know, some of you, when you hear these, are like, is that digital or physical? And the answer is however you interpreted it, but I think it doesn't. There are different meanings attached to digital objects. I can talk about that with my language. So chat with each other for 5 minutes, and we'll come back and see what maybe the collective has come up with. Okay? I don't have any music, so you can just sing. Thank you, Zoom folks. If you wanted to break our rooms to talk, you're more than welcome to.
It took me a long time to want to like bring myself up to space and have like the image or like for me. And so like my professionals here and our like workshop and I feel got to the other part of the team and also like it just makes it so cool and like I'm just so I don't know. I mean I was really way over and I love working like it's kind of fun for me. There's other reasons why, but
Yeah, just
that really takes me like to bring some and to feel comfortable bring someone else's self. So that's why but I know genres are important. That's why I love how she said this and like your work is because I feel bad if I ever other people feel like I'm one of but I still value me.
Every day.
You made her a second. This is our school.
Yeah, and she was like, "Will you
I was
do
a separate company.
She was like,
And now I've been hired and now folks see me as some people say, oh, you're still in school, you're still an intern. Oh, you're our full-time colleague, right? Those identities that you're sort of assigned to it's just and it really I was as a human sort of I was almost fully tipped to
Or in the middle, and I was maybe expecting like separation in particular, like
and like some of the tools that help you structure those places is so much, and that helps you keep yourself organized, create some boundaries, leave Slack from at home, like those small things can create
I got other kids in my bag.
Oh, okay. I was
That was integration. I was like, oh my god.
which one are you actually tracking?
I only count steps.
Yeah, exactly.
With apologies for interrupting some cool conversation.
What's the sense
I'm gonna try to clap. All right, if you can hear me clap once, I can't clap, so if you can hear me, clap for me. Sorry to interrupt my, by the way, thank you to Danielle. I just want to tell you, you're the most gracious person I've ever met. We all knew that, but yesterday I worked out with, and it's Silver, it's like the Dickens, and she walked me all the way to the health center and all the way back, and I said the afternoon at urgent care. And so above and beyond the college. I want to just hear from a couple tables, some ideas you had. And by the way, can somebody hold up Vonda's keychain?
Oh my God.
So that's mine. And these are mine. I mean, obviously these are tiny symbols and they're not.
I don't know,
your
it's
whole
important.
story. But they tell a story, don't they? So let's hear from a couple tables about any number of the questions that you maybe talked about, if anybody would care to share for a minute or two.
I just started a
Yes, please. Thank
conversation
you.
before we were pulled back about a third boundary area where we're kind of using our wood brains in a social way. So even like FDHE or I'm in the design society or so it's a kind of social, it's service work. It's still work. It's not paid. Sometimes you don't really know which bucket it's supposed to go into. Does it go into your work life or work world, or does it go into your social world? But that becomes another area that's just.
And I think when talking with students, the same thing happens. The life realms could be paid work, but they could be anything. They could be a faith community, right? Or they could be a neighborhood group or another volunteer kind of thing. So you're absolutely right. These are limited insofar as they kind of constrain us to these boundary realms. But we know that there is no such thing as an entirely private home and an entirely. So I appreciate it. One other comment about this. Yes, please.
So this made me think about the separation of the keys of the office and the home. And one time we were coming back from a family vacation, we came back and my dad could not find the keys to our house, but he had a tile, those things that track, for his office keys. So you're saying, glad we know where the office is, but this is not helpful. Like, using that tracking technology is not helpful in this moment. So it's just interesting, which one are you actually tracking? Which one do you actually care about?
And what do our digital inventions and designs do to accommodate or not accommodate either structural segments or integrations or individual matters? And the other thing I'll say is, I would venture a guess that most of us have quite a bit of discretion and autonomy in our paid work, more or less, relative to other folks who work in industries where you might be other time and space constraints. I have an office with a door that closes. That matters a lot in how much discretion I have to play with integrating. I just want to offer at the end, I appreciate you sharing those things, but I thought of a few things relative to the design piece. And I think it's going to come on. Now it's going backwards, and I don't know why it does that. What am I doing?
Yeah, this is something crazy.
All I did was hit the down arrow. One of the things I thought, I'll just sort of say,
Discussion questions, what you?
No, there it is, perfect.
Okay.
I thought, as my mom is this year considering moving into an assisted living facility, I wondered if what her boundaries might do in terms of her privacy and how much she discloses to other people when she shares walls with people, floors with people, dining places with people. I also think that different life stages might think about these aspects as mattering differently, not just in terms of digital aspects, but otherwise. And then very importantly, and this is my beef with the use of the word generations, by the way, which is the social construction. And if you want to read more about what might be wrong with using the word generation, read demographer Philip Cohen's blog. But the idea is there's more variation within age categories than there is between them in a lot of ways. If you think about race, bodily ability, gender, social class, any number of things, geography, global location. So how we use the word generation, it's maybe itself got some constructed boundaries that we have to a little bit. And then finally, if you're interested in reading more, and I'm sure this is not going to work, or it did work. So here's one book that I wrote that tells the story of all these research pieces, the stuff of family life. And the book I just wrote is basically a methods book, how to do social research if you're an architect or designer. Audience that I'm working on expanding. If you know any architects, Thank you.